Welcome to the Hazard Class Podcast. This is the podcast where I ask my stupid questions to some of the smartest people in and around the world of emergency services. My guest this week spent nearly 3 decades with the FDNY, serving in multiple ladder companies and retiring as the captain of ladder company 123. Prior to his time at FDNY, he worked as a volunteer and has tallied more than 40 years in the fire service overall. During his career, he's received some of the department's highest awards for bravery. After retiring, he's continued working as an instructor, author, and presenter, teaching nationally and working closely with fire engineering and FDIC. In 2011, he delivered the FDIC keynote address, and in 2020, he received the Tom Brennan Lifetime Achievement Award for his enduring impact on fire training and leadership. It's my honor to talk with Captain Mike Dugan. Mike, thanks for joining me this morning.
Good morning, Jake. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Yeah,
Good.
I'm very excited to get a chance to talk to you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Of course. Yeah. So obviously a storied career, a longer than normal or longer than average career, I would say, in a world of a lot of 20 and out guys in the fire service. This year, you spent more than double that working, on a fire truck. So let's go back to the very beginning of it. What inspired you to get involved in the fire service in the first place? And what year would that have been?
Okay. That would be 1966.
Holy hell.
I
Good for
was 10 years old, and my grandparents' house caught on fire.
Wow.
And they called my parents' house on a morning, and I heard my father get on the phone, and he was like, and this is back in the day, there were 2 phones in our house, one in the kitchen, one in my parents' bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
And my father said, okay, did you call the fire department? Okay, I'm on my way. And he looked at me and he said, your grandmother's house is on fire. And I remember this because it was a Sunday morning, and my father and I used to get up and we would make the bacon and get the stuff ready for breakfast. But being good Catholics, you couldn't eat until after Mass because you couldn't eat before communion back then.
Okay.
Okay. And so he said, I got to go. Your grandparents' house is on fire. And I said to him, I'm coming with you. And he said, no, you're not. And I said, yeah, I'm coming with you. They lived at the end of a road. And back then on Long Island, there were some rural roads and there were 4 driveways. How are they going to know which driveway to go in? First time I ever heard my father say a bad word, he said, shit, you're right, get in the car. I got a Buick station wagon and I directed them in. And they ended up making a rescue of my grandmother and my Aunt Helen off a porch roof, off of portable ladders. And then they hooked me up.
Were you witness to that? Did you actually see that happen?
I did see that happen. And when I volunteered, when I turned 18, I got to work with some of the people who actually made that rescue. Some of the guys who made that rescue, I got to volunteer with when I started. So on my 18th birthday, I applied to join the volunteer fire service.
Wow, that is a crazy story. I'm actually shocked how many people that I've spoken with now have some semblance of a similar story in terms of like experience of fire as a child that inspired them or something like that. What did your parents do? Like, what were their occupation?
My dad was in the cigarette advertising.
Holy crap! Talk about a career that doesn't get you don't talk about as much now. That's crazy. That's like a big business back then.
Back then, because when I was a kid, cigarette advertisement was allowed on TV until 1969. Mm-hmm. So my dad used to put commercials in the Super Bowl. When I was a kid, I got to go meet Joe Namath at Jets training camp because of my dad's company was involved with advertising on the Jets network or whatever. And I got to go have lunch with Joe Namath at training camp in 1968. Wow. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And your mom stayed home?
Mom stayed home. My poor mother was Irish Catholics. She was pregnant 9 times in 11 years. There were 6 of us. And
oh, my goodness.
Oh, yeah.
Where do you fall in the age range of your siblings?
I am the second oldest and the oldest male.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I am now the patriarch of the family.
What's the age gap to your youngest sibling then?
He is 9 years younger than me.
Okay. So you got it. I suppose, yeah, that would be that if you're kicking him out every year for a decade, right?
Oh,
Wow.
Yeah.
What was it like as a kid at your house? Like, what do you remember about big, crazy family at that point?
It was just crazy. It was, my parents were the neighborhood parents, and anybody could come into the family. And we had a couple of one of my sister's friends. I won't say her name, but her mother was her father died and her mother became a severe alcoholic. And she ended up moving in with us for probably 2.5 years. And we just protected her. And, we were the family. If we found a dog, we brought the dog home. And I remember at one point we had 3 dogs and my 5 brothers and sisters, so 6 of us, my mother, my dad, my grandmother, because my grandfather had passed away, and then somebody else just living with us who was there and became part of the family. My parents were that kind of people that if you need, come, we'll help you.
What do you think drove that in your family? That's a unique thing to be that welcoming into someone's home, right? What do you think drove that?
Well, it's a very funny story. My grandfather, Maurice Dugan, passed away in 1925 or 6, we're not sure which, from the flu, and left my grandmother with 4 kids, my dad and his 3 sisters, right before the Depression in Manhattan. And his best friend said on my grandfather's deathbed, he died of the flu, said, I will take care of your family. You have my word. And I thought he was my grandfather. I didn't know growing up. I thought everybody had 3 grandmothers because he was just my grandfather's best friend that I didn't know. And he became my grandfather. And he ended up doing very, very well for himself. And he became the CFO of the American Tobacco Company. And that's where my father ended up working. And he just raised us like his own. He raised my dad and my 3 aunts like his own, and then we became his grandkids, And he just treated us tremendously,
So, yeah, that that experience with the fire at 10, it had to be not only impactful for you but your family in general, right? To see that happen to your grandparents. Well, how did that affect your family's view on you joining the fire service?
They always thought it was a good thing. They always thought it was a great thing that I did it, that I was volunteering, and they never thought I was in any danger. I remember as a kid, we had a mutual aid to another department for a major fire in the local town, Huntington. When I was a kid, I was probably 18, maybe 19. And this was a major fire at a place called Corner Wines and Liquors. And I remember I'm up on the roof and I'm working with guys who were New York City guys and just good volunteers that have been around for a long time. And we're cutting the roof and we're pushing down the ceilings and everything else. And my parents are coming home from a dinner party and they see this fire. And my mother looks at my father and says, well, thank God they wouldn't let Michael up on that roof because he's so new at this stuff. And I'm up on the roof having a great time, and it was great. And so then I was working at the time. I was working as a machinery mover, a rigger, and a millwright. So building machines and moving. And we were moving some interesting stuff, artwork and stuff. So I took my first FDNY test when somebody told me I could get paid to do this, to crawl the hallway. But I didn't put that much effort into it because I was making such great money. And then in 1979, when the economy in New York City went down the tubes, I started looking around for something to do, and I ended up applying to a couple of civil service jobs. I applied to the NYPD, which I went on first, and then to the FDNY. And while I was on the NYPD, I got onto the FDNY. So I transferred over. In my class of 150 guys, I think there was 62 of us that were police officers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because everything could move it was a lateral transfer at that time.
How long did you spend in the NYPD?
Oh, a short period of time, only a couple of years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. I did not know that. What was that like? What was that viewed like? Was that viewed positively to make the transfer, or was it kind
absolutely.
of it was
absolutely. Yeah. And you kept your time, you kept your vacation, you kept your pay status wherever you were. I mean, the class that I came over on, a couple of the guys that came over were sergeants already. I mean, they had been promoted.
Oh, wow.
They had been promoted, and they came. And I remember going to. I told the desk officer was an old Irish sergeant with a brogue in the NYPD that I was going to the FDNY. I said I had to go down to the property section and voucher my gun because I had to turn my gun in because I wasn't allowed to keep my gun.
Mm-hmm.
So I turned my gun in, which I bought. Back then, you had to buy your own weapon. I bought my gun and I turned it in. And the sergeant looked at me and he said, "Oh, me Dugan, me lad." And I said, "Yes, Sarge, what is it?" Sergeant Mahoney. And he said, "Do me a favor, son." I said, "What is it?" He goes, "Don't walk, run. Get the fuck out of here. And go have that job. It's a much better job." And I was like, okay. And so I went and I joined the FDNY.
Was there ever a transfer in the opposite direction? Did people leave the fire service to go to the police?
Very, very, very infrequent. I know one or two. I know one guy who ended up meeting a girl, and her former husband, had been a fireman, and he got killed in the line of duty.
Oh.
And he had been a police officer, and she said, "I won't marry you if you're a fireman. I won't go through that again." So he went back to being a cop.
Wow.
Yeah. Crazy.
So when you finally make that decision, obviously police, then to fire, but now you're going to go to fire. What is that like at that point? So what you said that would be in the late 70s?
No, that was 85.
85. Okay. What's the environment like? What do you remember about the academy and the process and stuff like that?
Well, our academy was pushed a week longer because we had to take what we called peace officer training, or as we lovingly referred to it, it was sleep officer training. It was because of the laws that you are a peace officer and you can do searches and things like that due to exigent circumstances. You can get into places, and if you see things in plain view, drugs, money, and things like that, but you have to be trained in this. The control, the evidentiary control, and everything else, and what you can do. We had to get this extra thing, and they did it every Friday. And it was, we'd sit in the auditorium, and they'd take us out in the morning and run us 5 or 6 miles, make us do all our PT, and then we go sit in there. And if you fell asleep, they would punish you. So you had to stand up in the back of the room. I remember we used to walk around with coffee beans and stick them under your tongue to try to keep yourself awake, to suck on the caffeine, because it was just, they were talking, and it was monotone and everything else. But our academy went from 5 to 6 weeks. That was it. Then you went to the field.
Wow. And
you learned in the field. And I mean, now most of the academies are between 3 and 6 months for a lot of the academies. So it was just totally different. Then I went into the field.
What do you remember about that on-the-job process? Was it formalized in any way, shape, or form, or was it kind of like you'll figure it out as you go?
It was kind of you'll figure it out as you go. And I was the valedictorian of my fire academy class. And I ended up in a very, very slow company for my first stop. It was Ladder 137 in Rockaway Beach, Queens. And it was a great firehouse with great firemen. But a lot of them were, at the time, their motto was the washed up brothers on the beach. And it was Rockaway Beach. So they're right on the Atlantic Ocean. It was a beautiful place. But the guys I worked with were all such senior men that it was so different, because the engine was a 4-man engine at the time, because they didn't do that many runs. The engine only did about 1,200 runs a year. And the truck did about 2,000 runs a year. But I remember the engine, the junior man in the engine used to get the nozzle. And I remember one night I was working, and the junior man had the nozzle, had 29 years.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like, I mean, these guys had all been war years firefighters in great companies in Brooklyn and Queens and everything else. And this was a retirement home. And they sent us there because they sent a bunch of my probie class. 11 guys in my probie class went to this one battalion, and it was to kill overtime because there was so much overtime, and they didn't want the old guys retiring with extra money. So they sent us there, and then they said, oh, my goodness, we made a mistake. So while I was on my honeymoon, I was transferred to 43 Truck in Spanish Harlem without having a transfer request in, which was unheard of, to be a probie and still be transferred. I was the only fourth grade fireman at the time transferred on that order.
What do you remember about the change of pace at that point, going from, that slow company to something that I would imagine was probably much, much busier in Spanish Harlem?
Spanish Harlem is where they taught me how to be a fireman. It's where I learned how to do my job. I didn't know what was expected of me. I didn't know what the rules were. And, the first day I go in there, I'm sitting in the kitchen having a cup of coffee. And the senior man says, can I talk to you outside? And I said, sure. And I go outside and he says, do you know what your job is? And I said, no. What do you want me to do? I'll do whatever you want, but you've got to tell me what you want me to do. And he said, okay, this is what you're supposed to do. Nobody went through this with you? And I said, no. And he says, okay. And, in 43 Truck, it was a great company. And their motto was, the Halligan is like your face. It gets washed every day. You took every tool off the rig and washed them. You stood out on the apparatus floor and you got the Baraxo out and you cleaned all the tools. You oiled the hook heads. You cleaned the Halligan. You cleaned the axe. You polished everything. And then in 43 Truck, the thing that I loved about that was we used to have the riding list. And a lot of places, the officer wrote the riding list. But in 43 Truck, the officer didn't write the riding list. The junior man wrote the riding list. And he would go around to all the firemen and say, okay, Jake, you're the senior guy. And you're not driving today. What position do you want? What do you want today? And you would say, I want the OV, I want the irons, I want the roof, or I want the can. The chauffeur, the driver was always the driver. But you would go through the guys by seniority and say, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? And it would all determine who was there. And if anybody was leaving, who was leaving the firehouse. As the junior guy, if it was one of the senior men, a lot of times you would volunteer to go for the senior man, to go to take his detail to another firehouse. Some of the senior men didn't want you to because they wanted to know what was going on in other parts of the fire department. Other guys wanted you to so they could stay home and be comfortable. So it was always, but it was so much fun. You wrote the riding list. You got to know who the guys were. So you would come into a covering officer, and this was one of the things that I really liked about it. And you would say, hello, Lieutenant Smith. My name is Mike Dugan. I'm your can man. This is your riding list. This is who you have, who's your driver, who's your OV, who's your roof, who's your irons, and that's me there. We had one guy leave today. He was on overtime, and he's been hired for this company. So he's on the bottom here. And you would tell them everything that was done. So they now knew that all these guys knew exactly what they were doing. And I loved that. I always loved that.
How do you think that doing that prepared you to promote and lead?
Well, I think it just promotes company pride. I don't think as a junior man, I was ready to lead or anything else, but I got to know everybody, what their strengths and their weaknesses were as being a junior man. And I got to know all the officers and what they expected. So it was very nice to be able to figure that out, and you learn all of the things. And the other thing that I think the fire service has to do, and we have to be very smart about it, my wife says, there are unwritten rules in the fire service. There are things that we expect the probies to know that nobody's ever told them.
Mhm.
We have to spell out what we expect of them. When I was a captain in 123 truck, one of my predecessors put together a detailed list of what was expected of the probies when they were assigned. And it's what's going on a day tour, what's going on a night tour, what your responsibilities are, what the rules are for you, and everything else, and how you are supposed to do it. And I thought it was such a brilliant idea to be able to give it to these kids. Print it up. Here's your responsibilities. Here's your thing. And he always had them sign that they understood this, and he kept it in their folder that they were told this is what you are supposed to do. And I think that's important for all of us, especially people who promote, to make sure that the junior people, that the people coming in know what is expected of them. We can't think that they're going to know what I know because they're brand new. So we have to teach them and make sure that they understand that.
Where do you think that kind of pride and ownership over your job roles and duties, why does that make a firefighter better at doing their job, and what's the importance of that?
Well, I think the pride and ownership, as my friend Rick Lasky says, the pride and ownership in the fire department, in the company, is what you are. Everybody, I don't care where you live, what part of America, what part of the world you live in. If you are a firefighter, every one of your neighbors and friends knows that. If something goes wrong, whose door do they knock on? Who do they expect to help them? You are doing this. This is not a job. It's a calling. It's a vocation. And you have to be willing to be part of it. I have an elderly neighbor who lives next door. She calls me over all the time. Michael, I need help. And I go over, and it's hysterical, and she's, in her 80s. And I'm her go-to, and that's okay. And I have another neighbor who's the same way. I mean, unfortunately, my friend Christina, she lost her husband, Rob, who was one of my friends, to a heart attack, and I am there for her no matter what. And it's kind of what we are. It's our personalities. We are that type of people. And if you're not in the fire service, to be a good citizen, a good neighbor, and a good firefighter, you're in the wrong job.
Yeah, and it really comes down to, this is more or less the topic you covered in your keynote address at FDIC, right? Why are we here? And so as I kind of prepped for this, and I had already listened to that, in years past as well, but I re-listened to it, and I'm always interested in this idea of nature versus nurture in the fire service. Is like, do people that have those traits join the fire service, or do they join the fire service and obtain those traits?
Personally, I think everybody has those traits. Almost everybody. I mean, there are certain people who are narcissistic or psychotic or whatever else who don't have those traits. But I think every one of us has those traits. The fire service brings them out more. And in the fire service, the cream rises to the top. So, I think that we all want to make things better. We want to be a good human being and be a good example to our family and friends. So I think the fire service just allows us to do that, to bring that more to what we have than some of the other things because of where we are. Being a police officer, you could have those same traits, but they don't come to the surface as much because you are always looked at as coming in there to be a problem. And that's the unfortunate thing with the police service. You come in on people's worst days, and you might take away their husband, their mother or father might be just passed away, or something else. In a fireman, you come in the same exact thing. You are trying to help. You are down there doing the CPR. You are trying to put their fire out, trying to make their life better. And that's the difference between the two of them. So I see the fire service as pulling those traits out of people and making them more present, more on the surface. And that's the way I always taught my guys. I always said, listen, treat everybody like you'd like your mother treated. and how they respond to you is how you decide whether you go up or down in your treatment of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let them be the thermometer for their treatment.
Correct.
I think that that's a really great thing. And I think it's hard because especially with, increased burnout as run volumes go up and down. I think letting people, have their frustrations, but also saying we need to start at a level ground, right? We got to give them the option to be, dictate their own treatment, I guess would be the right thing. Is like,
Yeah.
hey, if you're going to be respectful, I'm going to be the most respectful person you can possibly imagine. I will do to the end of the world for you. But like, that's the thing is like sometimes people are so burnt out, so washed out from, their 20 runs a day or whatever it is, 6 runs after midnight, that they don't start at that baseline anymore, right? And they jump to, well, if you're going to be rude or, I'm going to be rude before we even talk, right? Or I already know that this is bullshit before we even, figure out what's happening.
Right.
But on the flip side of the coin, I think that, and maybe this is from a firefighter's perspective and not necessarily an officer's perspective, but I think sometimes we allow ourselves to be walked on too if we never allow them to dictate the temperature of the room, right? If you say, hey, if you're going to be rude to us, we're not going to stand for that either, right? We're here to help, but we're not here to be a doormat for you either if you don't want our help or whatever it might be.
Right. Yeah, I'm not here for you to kick me. I am here to help you, and I will gladly help you. But I am not going to suffer abuse or anything else. And you can do whatever you want to do. And but and I will say this right now: if you are the officer and you leave because of the way they treated you, or you say something, you have to go back and document it. I would take a mark in the company journal in the book if that happened at a run that, we went to Mrs. Dugan's house and she started cursing at the men or cursing at the members or using not even foul language. I don't care if they curse, but inappropriate, if they slurs and things like that, homophobic or whatever, any kind of, then I draw the line. But you have to go treat people the way you expect to be treated. And, this woman calling you, even though it's a battery and a smoke detector at 4:00 in the morning, guess what? She doesn't know it's the battery.
Yeah.
And you have to go in there with your meter and say, okay, here's our meter. Our meter reads 0. I think it's your smoke detector or your CO detector. It's probably the battery, but we can take the battery out. Do you have another battery? No. Sometimes we used to keep batteries on the rig. The fire department supplied us with batteries. We would put a new battery in it and change it. These people don't know that it's there. They don't know what's going on. And the other thing for you as the officer or the firefighter is you have to go in there and be aware of what you're going for. Now, I remember going to one as a CO detector, carbon monoxide. And we went to the house and very nice African-American gentleman met us at the bottom of the stairs. And he said, this thing keeps on just beeping a little bit and a little bit and a little bit. And then it stops and then it beeps and then it stops. And I said, it's probably your battery. He says, I thought that and I changed the battery. And I said, okay. I said, it might be the detector. He said, I know. I'm just worried because I had some work done on the chimney lately. And it was an old brownstone building. And I said, whoop. That's a key. Had some work done on the boiler? Yes. Okay, let's go inside. So we go inside and we go up to his daughter's bedroom. And this was outside the daughter's bedroom. And it was going off. We go in the daughter's bedroom and I got 500 parts per million of CO in the daughter's bedroom. And it was an old brick chimney that went up through the building and then in the attic above her bedroom, angled off a little bit to go up to come out the roof at the right, so it didn't go out right where it was going to affect the rafters. But right there, the chimney had the mortar had deteriorated. The attic was over 1,000 parts per million.
Wow.
So I was like, oh my goodness, we're going to have to shut your boiler down. You're going to have to get a repairman in it. They're going to have to probably sleeve your chimney. But if I had walked away from this one, I could have justified it. but I could have been responsible for that guy's daughter dying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you have to think about all of these things. You're getting called there for a reason, for something. And again, I know places that carry battery testers with them on the rig for a CO or a smoke detector call. And they check the battery. And if the battery is good, then they go, there's a problem here, because this is going off. And it might be the detector, but we're going to go in there and make sure there's nothing else going on. And I think that's brilliant. And that's thinking outside of the box.
Yeah, and especially in those CO runs are particularly treacherous in terms of people writing them off and them being unbelievably, deadly. And I've been at more than a few of those that have turned deadly. And that's one thing that my current captain now is really great about. He's like, we will not leave until we know why something is happening, right? He's like, I cannot go back to bed or move on with my day if I have any question of a doubt of something happening there that I don't know what it is, right?
And then, and very honestly, how do you justify that to not only your boss and your subordinates, the people that we just, did a drive-by, or as we called a wave. Mm-hmm. You did a wave at the run. Absolutely, positively not. Mm-hmm. Because how do you justify that? And then, very honestly, if you leave and they come back and something happens, how do you justify it to your wife and your kids? This is what I'm paid to do. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to not do my job? Yeah. I mean, come on.
Yeah, and let's be honest, it's while it seems like a lot of work at 2:00 in the morning, it's really, you're walking through a home quickly and verifying that there's nothing there. It's really not that much of a tax on you to do your job. But I think that, we always throw this, like, in terms of mental health and stuff, we'll say, well, it's not your emergency, right? It's not your emergency, it's theirs. But I think you can also flip that and say, yes, it's not an emergency to you, but to them right now, it felt like it was warranted a 911 call, right? It is an emergency to them, correct, even if it's a beeping smoke alarm or something like that. It's like, well, they're confused. They don't know what's going on. They're asking for help because whatever is happening is beyond their understanding, right? And so it's their emergency, right?
And you deal with this all the time, so you understand it. Mm-hmm. They haven't dealt with this. And that's why one of the reasons I tell everybody I know, the new 10-year smoke detectors are the greatest thing that ever happened to the fire service. I mean, the batteries are good for 10 years. I just put them all in my house. Mm-hmm. They're good for 10 years, so you don't have to worry about it. I went over to my neighbor, Christina. Her smoke detector was beeping, and I went in and I said, okay, did you put a new battery in? I did. So I took it off the wall, and I looked at the back of it, and I said, Christina, this one's from 2004. It's 2025. I said, it's time. They're usually good for 10 years. Uh-huh. And it's probably all the dust and the dirt built up in it. But just go get another one. Mm-hmm. And she says, I got 3. I said, good. Go get 3. Let me know when you come home from Home Depot with them or wherever you go. It doesn't matter. But I will put them up for you. Mm-hmm. And I went in and I just put up the smoke detectors. And she said, my brother can come from, I said, he lives 45 minutes away. I can do this in 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. It's a piece of cake. I showed up and I did the right thing. But again, that's every one of our neighbors knowing who we are and knowing what we will do. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's what we will do.
Mm-hmm. So I don't want to skip over the early portions of your career if we circle back now. Yeah. So you get on the mid 80s. I know in the early 90s is when you kind of got put up for some of those valor awards inside the FDNY.
Yep.
Talk to me about that incident or incidents. I know you got one in 92, one in 93. Was that for the same incident?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Talk me through that incident. What was it?
That was 2 days before Christmas, December 23rd, 1991. I was on my way home. I had been in another firehouse to drive that day, and I was coming back to my firehouse, 43 truck. at like 6 o'clock. I was waiting for another guy to show up to drive the rig from another firehouse because they didn't have any drivers in this firehouse. And I was a truck company chauffeur, so I had to drive the truck company. So I was down there and I got relieved and I came back and I walked into the firehouse, had my gear, and the guys are like, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Oh, I'm coming back. I was detailed today. I was down in ladder 16. I was driving 16 truck today." "Oh, okay. Are you available?" And they're like, I'm like, "Yeah, I was just doing a single tour. Yeah, I'm available. Why?" "Well, we're missing a guy. They don't have, they didn't have whoever it was, Smitty, on medical leave. So we need to hire a guy." Well, it's 2 days before Christmas and a night tour of overtime. It's 15 hours of overtime was a pretty good. I'm like, "Yeah, I'm available." So again, I come in and I was the second senior guy working that night. And they said, "Well, we thought we were getting a detail from another firehouse and he didn't come. So we gave you the roof." Now I'm the senior guy on the back step and I could have bitched and said, "Well, wait a second, I get to pick what I want." But I was on overtime. It was right around Christmas. And I said, "Yeah, no problem. I'll take the roof. It's not a big deal." And so they go, "Oh, and by the way, none of us are real good cooks. We got to go get a meal." "We got to go get a meal." And I'm like, son of a gun. Okay, let's get on the rig. And we were just about getting on the rig and the tones came in. So we were right in place. And we get down to the box and it was down the block and it was a 6-story tenement building, but a big tenement. It was a new law. So it had, I think about 6 or 7, it could have been 8 apartments per floor. So I go up to the roof, I go up the adjoining building, get up to the roof, go over, put my roof rope down, and I got my air pack, and I got my axe and my Halligan, and I force the door, and the people are screaming in the back, "There's a guy, there's a guy." And I go over there, and above the fire, there's a guy hanging out the window. He's standing on the windowsill outside, hanging on the window with black smoke rolling over his head. And I go get on the radio and I tell him I've got a guy strapped at the window on the 5th floor above the fire and heavy smoke pushing out above his head. I'm going to start setting up for a roof rope. And 2 guys from 26 truck show up, Billy Donahue, Big Billy Donahue, and John McCann, and both good guys. So now the substantial object where we can tie the rope off is here, but then we have to go off on an angle of about 45 degrees to the side to go down to this guy. So John McCann takes the rope. Big Billy Donahue sits on the ground and he's my substantial object, and I go over the parapet and I grab this guy, and I know the guy's name because my neighbor at the time had the same name. It was Pablo Martinez. And as I get down to the 5th floor, this guy jumps out at me and I grab him and I catch him. And thank God he wasn't a big man, but I'm holding this guy now like a baby, and I'm 5 stories up, and it's 7 stories in the rear, and they lower me down to 2, and I don't quite make it to the ground because we're out of rope, and a guy lifts me up, a guy from another truck company, Tommy Montgomery, who was involved in both of my rescues, lifts me up so they can untie the rope and drop me down. But it was December 23rd. The guy who owned the apartment was a street merchant at the time. It was a very Hispanic building. We called it Little Mexico over there. It was a Mexican. And this guy, I got done and I'm shaking like a leaf, adrenaline and the whole 9 yards and doing everything. And I'm sitting in the back of an ambulance, and here comes this guy who was the father. He made a push to get his 2 kids who passed away at this fire down this hallway. And his hands were burnt and his face was burnt. The skin was coming off his nose. I mean, he made a push to try to get to his kids that would make any fireman jealous. And I'm sitting in the ambulance and I look at the paramedic who's there, and they're saying, "Okay, how you feeling?" and all that. I said, "Listen, I'm going to go sit on the curb, take care of this guy. He's in a lot more shape than I am." And they said, no, you're a member of the service. You go first. I said, "This guy, no, get this guy an ambulance. I'll go sit on the curb. And I went and I sat on the curb, but I got the guy off the rear and on the rope and down to 7 stories. So that was the incident.
Wow.
And if I had been regularly assigned to that, I wouldn't have been on the roof.
Yeah.
You know, so it's all fate. It's all
strange
fate.
how life works out like that.
Yep.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, I had an incident where I ended up winning a couple awards, or I don't know what the hell you'd call it, getting a medal or whatever. And I was on a duty trade. I was working on a shift that I don't normally work in, the position I don't normally work at the time, and it worked out very similarly. So talk to me about that. That is a uniquely FDNY rescue, right? I mean, I don't know other agencies that are doing roof rescues or rope rescues off the roof like that. It is a thing that from the rest of the fire service, I see as like, one of the coolest things that someone in the fire service can be a part of. And so talk to me about that culture and like the decision to do that. Like, I don't even know if you would know the history of it, because it seems like something that would be way outside the bounds of what people would allow to safely happen. And they're still happening, right? Inside FDNY culture.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Why do you think is it that the FDNY has done this for so long and has done it so successfully, despite the fact that most agencies wouldn't even consider allowing it?
Well, again, a couple of things. Risk reward scenarios. Risk a lot to save a lot. And a lot of the FDNY's buildings are over 100 years old. The tenements, 100, 80, 90 years old. There are 2 ways of out. One is the interior stairs and the other one is a fire escape. But if there's a fire in a room, especially with what we have now burning, it doesn't allow these people to get to. So they're out a window and there's no place to get them. In shafts, in the rear, where they can't get out their bedroom door to get to the other room, to get to the fire escape. It doesn't work for them. So these are things that, we always plan on. Every Monday in the FDNY, every truck company in the city of New York repacks its life-saving rope. They repack their rope. And we used to drill on it every Monday, and we would drill on it all the time. We would go up, when I was a captain, when I was a lieutenant, we would go up to the bunk room. We would drill on the rope. We would practice. Okay? Because these things happen. Now, the company I was in, 43 Truck, I remember one time going to the fire academy, the Rock as we call it, Randall's Island, for rope training. And I was working. One of the guys working that day was Jimmy Sears, who had made a rescue of a captain who was stuck. It's a famous quote. Jimmy Sears, he said, when a brother is stuck, you got to go get him. And that's exactly what he did. And he went up and got the rope and went off and picked the captain out of the top floor window and saved his life. And then Jimmy Steele, another guy I was working with that day, had also made a roof rope rescue and gotten this woman out of a bathroom window. She was stuck in a bathroom, and you know how small the bathroom windows are. He got this woman out of a bathroom window and saved her life. Wow. And we pull in for rope training, and a guy looks at us, and he looks at the room, and he points to the pictures. Wait, that's you? That's you. That's you. You guys can go back home. Go. Just get out of here. We don't need to do this training. We know that you're doing this training all the time. It was part of our fabric, was to train on what you were going to do. Train on your equipment. Train on everything. I mean, training pays immeasurable dividends. You can never train enough. You can never. If you think you're good enough that you don't need to train, it's time for you to retire.
Talk to me about that, like, setup, like from an actual rope perspective. I've never actually heard it. I've seen obviously the videos of the rope rescues happening, but how is the actual system laid out for it to work? Are you hooked into a harness that's built into your bunker gear?
Well, when I did it, we didn't have harnesses. We used the bowline on the bite and the slippery hitch, and you were tied.
Wow.
You were tied. And we did have got belts, and then we got rid of belts, and then we got belts back. So now everything is worked off of the belt. So it's a different, but the rope, it was packed a certain way. You had to pack it inside and in concentric sixes, so it would play out. If you dumped it over, how it played out, it was all planned. And then they've since then they've gotten a little better. The ropes have gotten better and everything else. But there was a ton of drills. There was a ton of working with this, and you practiced until it became second nature. It's muscle memory.
Has the FDNY had like a significant quantity of line of duty deaths associated with roof rescues like that? I can't think of one off the top of my head, but I'm sure there's been so many.
I know a couple that went the Frisbee Fitzpatrick fire, where the two guys died when the rope snapped. But that was right before I got on the job. That was probably 83 or 84.
Okay.
And it might have even been earlier, but I'm not 100% sure. But that was an old manila rope. And back in the day, the manila rope was used for everything. And they didn't have any standards in place for the rope care. So Frisbee was caught at the top floor of a fire up in Harlem in 28 truck. And Jerry Frisbee went off the roof to get him on a manila rope. And then they were pulling them back up on a manila rope, and the coping stones sheared the rope, and they fell and to their death 6 stories. So that's the only one I can think of, but that's when all of the rope procedures came in, like when it had to go out of service. I remember, and it's crazy, but I remember being at a run. We had a mustard factory in my response area, because it was a very big German area in Yorkville, in that part of Manhattan. And there was the vinegar, and they made mustard and they had vinegar. Well, the roof rope was out in the street when this vat of vinegar let go. The rope has to go out of service because vinegar is an acid. And everybody's like, what happened to it? It got exposed to vinegar. Well, vinegar's an acid. You can't have, if your ropes are, we're not allowed to pack the rope and repack the rope on the apparatus floor because of the materials that are on there, the oils, the stuff out of the rig, the transmission fluid, and all the other stuff. It has to be packed on a floor that is, we used to do it in the bunk rooms. We had a nice clean floor and everything else, and we'd have to drill and we'd practice with it all the time. And that's where a lot of places did it. And you take it up to the bunk room and do it on the floor of the bunk room. Lay the rope out, check the rope, you'd inspect it, you'd go through the whole thing. And when the truck did it on Mondays, they would take the engine's rope off the engine, because each engine company had one too, and they would put it in service on our rig for that time frame in case we got to run. And then on Tuesdays, we'd repack the engine's rope.
Wow. Talk to me about that, like that process of the accolades and stuff. I know that, like, after my incident, I kind of struggled with that. I struggled with the idea of that. I felt like I was just doing my job, the thing that I had prepared to do. And now I finally had to do the thing that I've been preparing to do for a decade. And now everyone's making a big deal out of this thing, right?
Yeah.
How did you handle it?
It was interesting because I remember I got the Daily News Hero of the Month. Excuse me. And I also got the Daily News Hero of the Year. And that came with a trip. But I'm sitting there with my wife, and they're talking about me going off the roof of the building, and my wife is pregnant with our first child. And they're saying how I put my life at extreme risk going off the roof of a building on a rope. And here's my pregnant wife sitting there, and all of a sudden I feel these fingernails digging into my hand. Like, what the heck are you doing? My wife thinks of me every time I was at the firehouse. I was either when I was a fireman, I was either in the TV room or the bunk room or the kitchen. She never thought of me outside at a fire or anything else. When I was an officer, I was either in my office, in the kitchen, or in my bunk room. because most of the officers in New York City have individual bunk rooms. But never. But I remember back in the day, now this dates me, of course, but with phone booths or phones, I had a phone calling card. So I could charge it to my home phone, and I'd be out on a run, and maybe it'd be like a vacant building fire or something else. If I was talking to my wife and saying good night and we had a run, I had to call her back. That was her rule. I had to call her back. So I remember standing on a street corner in Harlem at like midnight, dialing home on the credit card. All right, I'm fine. Where are you? Oh, we're heading back to the Firehouse now. Okay, the building was fully involved. It was a vacant. We were going to be there all night or whatever else. But I would tell her what she wanted to hear. Okay, so the accolades they're not what we do, but unfortunately, we should learn to do them better. Because if they get in trouble, the first thing they're going to say is an off-duty firefighter or a firefighter or anything else. When you do the right thing, we don't like to take the accolades. And that hurts us in the long run, in my opinion.
That's an interesting take. Yeah, that's a really interesting take, actually, in terms of, they're happy to call us a firefighter when it's not good press, right? So maybe a little bit of good press for the fire service is not so bad, right?
It's not so bad. Nope.
So coming off the back of that, right? So now we're in the mid 90s. At what point do you make the decision to promote?
I made the decision in the late 80s to start studying. And I started studying, and I took the test in, I think, 92. Could have been 93. I'm not sure the date. But I got promoted in January of 94 to lieutenant. So I bounced around for a while as lieutenant and ended up in 42 truck in the South Bronx. So I did get in trouble when I got promoted. I got in trouble when I got my medal for my mustache.
No. Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
I also got in trouble for my mustache after my medal. This is hilarious. That's so funny. What was that? What was your discipline? They got upset with you and you had to do your press conference or what?
They said that when I showed up for the Daily News Hero of the Month, my mustache made U-turns on my face. And when I was younger, my mustache was red. It was bright red.
Okay.
So, now it's white. But it was, I was told to shave the next day, and they released it to the papers. So the Daily News the day before had me getting the Hero of the Month and the Hero of the Year award. And the next day they had my picture and a picture of a chief. And they said that my mustache should look like his, which was perfectly trimmed, not below the lips and all that. And they said that I was an embarrassment because of my mustache. Wow. And my rescue made page 21 or 22. My mustache made page 7.
Oh, my goodness. It's unbelievable, the parallels between the story. I was told at the time that my mustache was personally disrespectful to administration. That's what I was told. I was like, I did not think about our administration at all when I shaved my face. Not at all.
Yeah.
But so talk to me about that decision, right? How do you know as a firefighter you were ready to move on? Or how would somebody theoretically know that they're ready to lead?
I don't think anybody ever knows they're ready to lead. I think you have to step into that role and be willing to do it. I had a lieutenant and I had a captain, even more so. My captain, Captain Marshall, used to say, when you're studying for lieutenant, take $100 bill and put it in your books in front of you. That's how much more a lieutenant is making per tour than you are. What could you do with that? What could your family do with that? And then when you were studying for captain, he told you put another $100 bill in it, because that's how much more a captain is making than a lieutenant. And this is what you want to do. This is for your family. So I studied with the idea of bettering myself and bettering my family.
What was different about working as a company officer than you expected it to be?
That's a good question. I'd have to think about that one a little bit, but the things that were different were, well, automatically respect. But if you're a company officer, especially in New York City, bouncing around, the first thing the men are going to ask you, the men and the women working are going to ask you is, where'd you work? Where'd you come from? They want to know what kind of a firehouse you came from, what its reputation is. Now, again, you can have a guy or a girl who's worked in some slow places be one of the best lieutenants you could ever have. You could have people who have been in great places who don't really promote themselves. They don't take that. They still want to be a fireman, just make lieutenants money. You got to promote yourself. You've got to be willing to be the boss. It's like being a parent. You can be a parent or you can be a friend to your child, but you can't be both. You can't do both. So you have to decide what you want to do. And I think the thing about it is how much most times the people will try to keep you out of trouble. That was one of our rules in the New York City Fire Department. Never, ever, ever get a covering boss, someone who was there for the day, for the tour, for overtime or whatever. Never get them in trouble. Never. Okay? Do not do stupid stuff. Be aware of what you're doing and always take care of that. Take care of them because you have to protect them.
So in terms of that leadership and, managing your crew, personnel management, leadership, accountability, all those things, and then actual tactics, strategy, firemanship, where does it land in terms of being a good company officer? How do you find balance between those things?
I think that's such a personal question, where you find balance. I mean, first off, if you don't know what's required of the people who are doing the job, you got a problem. You've got to know what's required of them. You've got to know what they're going through. Okay. And, listen, some of these places where you're doing 48s, and I think you do 48s.
Well, I did yesterday because I worked an overtime day into my normal 24.
Okay.
But if we worked 48s where I work, we would all be zombies.
Zombies. Yeah. And you've got to have your people's best interest at heart. And you've got to understand that you are going to take, sometimes you're going to have to do things to take care of your people. And that's the whole thing. Listen, with the firemanship in good companies, the men and women will do the job no matter who the officer is. Okay? They will do, they know what's going on. A good engine company anywhere in the world will pull up and look at the fire and say, okay, we need 1 3/4 or a 2-inch hand line, or we need a 2.5. This is what we need for this fire. They will know how to stretch. They will know how much to stretch. If you have to sit down and tell them exactly what to do. I want you to stretch 1 3/4. I want you to stretch 4 lengths. I want you to take it through the front door. They're not a great company. They have them trained. They should be able to do that stuff without being told what to do. The driver, the operator, the MPO, whatever you want to call them, the chauffeur, they have to know how to hook up to a hydrant, get water, and they have to be able to do it well. Okay. I mean, there have been guys I've known who couldn't get water for a pot of spaghetti. And there are other guys I know who could get water out of a rock in the Sahara Desert. How they did it is amazing. So you have to know what your people, what their capabilities are. And you have to understand your people. And, you also have to understand as an officer, you have to understand you are not the smartest guy in the room. You're not the smartest girl in the room. There's always somebody that knows more about certain subjects than you do in every firehouse. And that's okay. Your job is to find those people, tap into those people, and help them bring the rest of the department up and the rest of the company up.
So in that, how do you foster a culture where people take accountability to have those skill sets?
I think the men and women in the fire company do that. I don't think that's the officer's job. because the officers change. That fire company doesn't change. The officers change. You'll get a new captain, a new lieutenant, whatever your department has, a new station officer coming through. But that engine company, that ladder company will have the same name throughout its career. And I think that's one of the things that is great about the New York City Fire Department is the accountability of that company to itself. I remember being a captain and coming back from a job at 3 o'clock in the morning. And my senior man came to me and he said, "Hey, Cap, we're going to have a drill in the kitchen." I said, "Okay, I'll be right in." He goes, "No, you're not invited." I said, "Okay." He said, "Go upstairs, take a shower, do whatever you got to do. Come back down. I'll come knock on the office door when we're done. But this is a drill I'm holding and you're not invited." Okay. And he said to the engine officer, "Boss, you're not invited either. Sorry." And it was a covering boss, but this is an in-house drill, and please go do whatever you got to do, but I'll tell you when we're ready to go back in service. Okay, so my senior guy saw something happen at that fire that was wrong and blatantly wrong, but he did not want to embarrass the members in front of me or the other officer, so he was going to take them into the kitchen and have a drill with them and go over what he saw. And that to me is how a good company operates. And you don't have to exclude. You can have a drill or whatever else and then go grab the men and the women afterwards and talk to them. But you have to be willing, the company has to be willing to stand up for itself, to make itself better and to hold itself accountable.
So over your career, you worked with and knew some exceptional firemen, like world-class.
Absolutely.
What are the traits of a world-class fireman?
They always want to get better. They always want to train. And if they see something that they don't know or understand, they are going to stop and investigate it. They're going to find out what it is. If we were out at 3 o'clock in the morning and we saw a door in an apartment that we didn't know, what kind of door is this? What kind of, okay, we would stop, we would look, we would find out. We would document the address, go back during the day, knock on doors in the building, knock on a superstore and find out what was different about this door. Back in the day, we found that Israeli lock that had the 5 fingers coming out of it. And we found that on a job. I mean, that job, they stretched 12 lengths to get to the center of an O-shaped building with a center courtyard up the rear on the top floor, and the engine had 12 lengths stretched before we got through the door. Well, we went back the next day and we asked for the lock, and the owner said, "Let me see." And he tried the lock and it still worked, and he said, "I can't give it to you. It's a $500 lock." I said, "Okay, understood. It still works." I said, "Can I take some pictures?" And I took some pictures of it. But you have to understand what you're doing. And if you see something that you don't know, make sure everybody else knows about it. If you find multi-lock doors that go up to 4-way doors that we found in some of the projects, you would tell the lock by where the lock was on there. And you would look at it. Then you have to figure out how you're going to force this door. And it was a specific way we forced the door. You always started at the top, worked to the side hinge, and then once you got the top and the side inside the frame a little bit, you would shimmy up the bottom and force the door in. But those took you an extended period of time to get through those doors. You had to know where they were, and they were in a lot of our project buildings, so you had to know. And then we went to the projects after one of the fires, and we said to the guys, "What are you doing with this door?" And they said, "We're going to throw it in the garbage." No, we're going to take it. We put it in a firehouse. We had it in the firehouse so all the guys could see it, and we had it on like an old gate hinge so you could swing it back and forth to see what the front and what the back of the door looked like. So those are the kind of things you got to do. You got to be into the job and into getting better.
Yeah. So imagine you are creating, the perfect fireman from dust, right? You get to choose the traits and abilities that they have. What skill set do you want them to have? Like say they're going to read a book. What do you want them to know about to be successful as a fireman?
I think Bobby Gallione from Rescue 2 said it best. Heart and balls. Okay? Heart and balls. Listen, we can teach you the rest of it. As long as you are willing to do this, you are willing to go in where other people run out. If you are willing to do it, you have the heart to do it, and you are not afraid. Okay. And unfortunately, there have been firefighters that are afraid. Okay. And we have to find a place to put them if they've gotten on the job where they won't hurt the company and take a person out of that company. But we have to have people who are willing to do the job and willing to learn. They have to be willing to learn. And listen, if your response area is private dwellings, you got to be good at doing private dwellings. But then you end up in downtown, in the business district. And now you're looking at doors, forcing doors where, you were forcing private dwelling doors. Now you're looking at these thousands of dollar doors that you can't be just hitting with a Halligan and breaking, because they'll be complaining to the mayor and the chief of department. So you have to know your area, know your response area, and know what you're doing and be good at what you're doing. If you are going to a private dwelling, 90% of the time, you ought to be damn good at going to a private dwelling. You ought to be good at getting your wife, your kids out of that private dwelling in a fire emergency. Then you should spend your time training on that. What's 95% of your calls are. The other time, you should train on the buildings that scare you in your district, the anomalies. One of my heroes in the fire service is a chief by the name of Mike McNamee from Worcester, Massachusetts. And I just happened to be up in Worcester in December for the anniversary, December 3rd. It was December 3rd, 1999 for the Worcester. But I was up there. I was driving by. I was going up to the Massachusetts Fire Academy to do a class. And I stopped by Worcester and saw all my old friends up in Worcester. And Mike McNamee stopped more guys from going into that building and dying. You have to know your buildings. And he used to say, that building scared me. And I wish I spent more time understanding that building. If there's a building in your district that scares you, you have to know the building and train your people for the building. If there's a weird building in your district, you have to spend the time training and doing things for that building.
Yeah, I think and that's an argument that I hear people go back and forth on, which is, should we be training for the 90% run, the one that we go on every single day, or should we be training for the 10% run, which is the one, or maybe less than that, the 1% run that we're never getting experience from just running them routinely? And, do you have a take on that? Like where you feel like spending your time makes most sense?
Well, I think you can kind of do both. Okay, you can go out and plan a drill on stretching hose line to a private dwelling. Pull up in front of a private dwelling, look at it. Okay, there's the hydrant. There's where we're going. How many lengths? Where are we going in there? Okay, good. Okay, now what do you see here? If there's people at that window, what are we taking? Where are we going? What are we doing? Okay, and we could just take pictures, go back to the firehouse and do it at the firehouse. Now you go to your weird building, your 6-story building, your 4-story building, your hotel, whatever it is, your building that scares you, the hardware store, the dollar store, any of those, and you go, okay, now what if we have here? What are we pulling? What kind of hose? What are we doing? What is our plan? Where are we going in? What are we making attack? Are we committing our people? What kind of roof is it? What kind of support system? How are we getting in there? Okay. And that's where you got to do it. You can do both. You have to make time to do both, but you can do it. And again, you can do it when you're out doing the other things that we're required to do. If you're required to do building inspections, you go out in a building and you turn it into a drill. Okay, go do paperwork on this building. Let's see if there's anything unusual. Let's document it. We'll document the address. We'll put it in the computer system. So it's all part of being good at your job and, using your time wisely. Now, I don't know if you guys do hydrant inspections.
We don't. No, we have a safety and inspection department that does all of our inspections.
We used to have to do hydrant inspections on all the hydrants in our district twice a year. So what I started as the captain was we kept a list of the hydrants on the rig that were ours. And if we pulled up to a box, and the engine company always pulls up, checks the hydrant, okay, opens it, flushes it, and checks the hydrant. See if it's draining properly for bad weather or anything else. For one of our hydrants, I call the engine chauffeur and I say, hey, how was that hydrant? Any problems? No. Okay, that's the hydrant in front of 123 3rd Street. Okay, there we go. We inspected it on this night. There we go. We did that hydrant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now when we have to go out on hydrant inspection, we have less to do. So now we have more time to drill. We make judicious use of our time.
Yeah.
Okay. If we're doing something, make sure that we mark it down and take the time to do it. Okay.
So going back to your career progression, right? Eventually you go from lieutenant to captain. And now that's obviously a system that not all departments use in terms of being a station captain. How long did you spend as a lieutenant before you were promoted again?
I got promoted to lieutenant in 94. I became a captain July 1st of 2000.
Okay. How did that job role shift? Was there a big shift in terms of now you're managing the managers at all, or how did that work?
Yes, absolutely, because you're in charge.
Mm-hmm.
You're in charge. You could get in trouble when you're on vacation with your wife if your company does something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's your fault because you didn't train them properly. So you have to be aware. Captains in New York City, we have 3 lieutenants, and usually, depending on the size of the company, 20 to 30 firemen assigned to your company. So you have to know what's going on in your company. You have to be aware. You have to talk to your officers. You have to see everybody and kind of get an idea of what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Where does morale come into that? Like, this is a discussion I often have with chief officers and ranking officers of, morale in the fire service is often fickle. There's the rumor mill. There's sometimes too much time spent around the coffee table, whatever it might be. But whose job is it to maintain morale in the fire service?
I think it's everybody's, but I mean, the captain steers the ship. Okay. The captain is the one who is pointing the company in the right direction, and it's the direction you want it to go in. I mean, you can do things any way you want, but you have to understand there are consequences in both directions, where you want to do it, how you want to do it. What you expect of your men, they should know what you expect of them, what you want of them, okay? And you have to train them for it. You also have to be aware that they're going to want to move on. They're going to want to get better themselves, move to a special operations command, or study, or transfer, or whatever else. And that's all fine. Your footprint, your fingerprints are throughout the department because of the people you have trained in these jobs that you have made good through this. So I think it's very, very vital that you understand that you are not there. Listen, 6 months, a year from now, somebody else will probably be in a position you're in right now. Who knows? And it's okay. But you have to understand that what you are doing is for what you're doing for the good of the department, how you're making it better for the department.
Mm-hmm. How do you remain connected to the department as a whole in a department as large as FDNY, right? It's probably really easy to become solitary inside your little island, inside your station. How do you feel, or is it possible to even feel fully connected to the entire department out of a department that large?
You can't feel fully connected to the department and a department that large, but what you can do is volunteer for things, volunteer to help things out. I taught the annual education day for quite a long time. I was on the meritorious review committee. I was on the apparatus committee. I volunteered for things at certain points in my career. So get involved, and then you get involved with everybody and get the help and everything else that you need.
So shortly after your promotion to captain, obviously 9/11 happens, which is, a career shaping event for every FDNY member. and really every member of the American Fire Service and the fire service in general. Pretty much everyone has some sort of story about it.
Yep.
If you're willing, what was your experience?
Well, I was at the fire academy that day. The day before, I was at a party. On September 10th, 2001, I was at a party in 73 and 42 where I had been a lieutenant. And they were having a rededication of the firehouse. 73 and 42 had been out of their firehouse for a year and a half because they had to redo the apparatus floors and redo the firehouses to bring it into compliance. The apparatus floor of the engine was so bad that they had screw jacks in the basement to hold the floor up. So when the engine backed in, the floor, it didn't collapse into the basement. So they had to redo the thing. So that day we were at the party, and 11 men who were at that party did not see sunset the next day.
Wow.
So I was supposed to be working that day. So I took what we called the self-mutual. I took that day off to go to the party. And the next day I paid it back at the fire academy teaching. And I was teaching annual education that day. So we were sitting there, and somebody came into the office and said, a plane hit the World Trade Center. And our first thought was, what small plane hit the World Trade Center? We thought it was like like a Piper Cub or something hit the World Trade Center. And we look and we see the fire at the building, and all of a sudden we see the second plane hit. And the chief in charge, Chief Santangelo, Nick Santangelo at the time, said, okay, all the guys who have assigned companies, report to your companies right now. Guys who are not assigned to a company, we're going to get a bus and we're going down to the World Trade Center. If you have your gear, get your gear. If not, get gear. Get flashlights, get tools. We're getting on a bus. So we got on a bus and drove down to the World Trade Center. And we got down there as the second tower collapsed. Wow. Second tower collapsed when we got down there. And I remember seeing a picture of ladder 113, which was one of the companies. At the time, I was in what we called the R group. And R in New York City means relief. And I was in the 25R. And my companies were 290 engine, 234 engine, 175 truck, 113 truck, 132 truck, and one covering tour. And I looked at 113, Camp Rogers Rats. The rig was on fire in front of the World Trade Center. The rig was on fire, and there was nobody putting the fire out. Nobody cared. I was like, this is bad. This is bad. Then we're walking past there when I see the wheel of a plane, and you could tell it's a jet plane with all of the shocks and everything else on it. And next to it is the foot of a female. I don't know what it was. It was an ankle and a foot in a high heel,
Oh my God.
And I'm like, oh my God. Yeah, exactly. Oh my God. And then I don't know if you know the picture, if you've seen the picture, a guy was walking around with this flag, and I looked at him, and it was Matty James, the Brooklyn trustee. And I said, what are you doing with that? He says, I don't know. I found it on the ground. I said, we got to get that up. And I grabbed that flag and we put it up on a light pole.
Oh my gosh, that's you in that photo?
Yeah.
Oh
on
my
the light
goodness.
pole, not the three. I'm the single guy on the ladder. Yes, that's me. That's me. Yeah.
I can't even fathom the sight. Having went previously through the bombing years prior, was it even conceivable that the towers could collapse that way in terms of the mindset at that point?
No, not at that point. No, we should have known better because of the construction type, because that construction was not New York City code, because it was owned by a multi-state agency. The Port Authority owned the World Trade Center. So it wasn't built to New York City code. So no, it wasn't in our thoughts at all that the buildings could come down like that. No.
What was it like in the time, days, weeks, months to follow? What do you remember about that?
Working in funerals. We went to funerals, and a lot of times they didn't have the body. You went to a memorial service. Sometimes they did get the body back. But I remember one day having 4 funerals in the same day of people I knew, friends.
Oh my goodness.
And how do I do this? And my wife came to me and said, whose family needs you most. Go to that funeral. And she was my savior during this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Was my wife.
Mm-hmm. So you're still married?
Oh, yeah. Oh,
so
yeah.
how long have you been married now?
In May, it'll be 40 years.
Wow. Congratulations. That's
Yeah.
hard enough to stay married 40 years in civilian life. The fire service in general is more treacherous on marriages than most career fields. So I just passed my tenure last July, or this past July. How do you do it? How did you make it happen this long? Like, what's the key to a fire service marriage?
Communication is one. But the other thing is date your wife. I used to go out and I'd get an overtime tour, or I always worked side jobs. I had a deal with my wife that she didn't have to work, and I would work. I would make the money. I would work, but she could never complain about my working. So I worked. I used to have 3 jobs, and I would work all the time. And if I came into a little extra money, got a little extra cash, I would give it to my wife and say, here, put this in an envelope for date night. You and I are going out. We're going to reconnect. We'll pay for a babysitter. We'll go to a movie. We'll go have a nice dinner. We'll do whatever. But we are going out. And keep dating your wife. Keep dating your husband. Make time away from the kids, away from, I coached lacrosse. I coached basketball. I stepped up for all of the things that my kids needed because that's what I wanted to be. I was also known as a designated dad because if the kids needed a ride, if my daughters weren't home, I would never have a drink. I waited until they got home. And I remember getting a call one night. My daughter was at a Sweet 16 party, my youngest, and the mother who was supposed to pick them up was drunk and couldn't come get them. I said, I'll be there. It's a half an hour away. I'll be there in a half an hour. Stay together. If anything happens, call 911. And I got there and there were 7 girls. And this mother just didn't think and got herself banged up. And, never trusted her again. But I understand it can happen. But, you should not allow it to happen when you're doing that.
How do you maintain a relationship with your kids throughout this too? I have 2. And I think that, the time away, effectively, at least in our schedule, we're spending a third of our life away from our family, right? How do you maintain those relationships and make them fruitful?
You spend time with them. Coach lacrosse, coach basketball, coach softball, coach whatever else you want. You also talk to your kids. I had a deal with my youngest, who was my athlete. And I had a deal with my oldest, who was my bookworm. The oldest one, she and I would read books together. She would say, I want to read this book, Dad. Okay. Give me the book. Get me a copy of the book. And she used to go to her teachers and say, listen, I'm reading this. Can I have an extra copy of this? And they'd say, why? She goes, my dad's going to read it with me. And they would be like, oh, my God, here you go. Take it. Bring it back when you're done. And I would read it. And I always thanked the teachers. And the teachers always thanked me for that one. So still to this day, my daughter and I sometimes read the same books. And she always gives me books for Christmas and everything else. And I get books. And I just got my older daughter, who's an English teacher, to read Lonesome Dove, one of my favorite books. And, she got me to read her favorite book, East of Eden by Steinbeck, whatever. Make the connections where you have my little one was my lacrosse player. She was my basketball player, and I coached her. And I always used to say, I'd get in the car afterwards, and she'd say, okay, you want to talk, Dad? And I'd say, yeah, but who do you want to talk to? Do you want to talk to your dad, or you want to talk to your coach? 2 different people. I'm going to give you 2 different answers. What do you want? She goes, be my dad. Okay, you did great. This is what I thought. I loved what you did on all that. And then she'd say, be my coach. Okay, you could have done this a little different. You could have tried that and all that. But you have to develop these relationships with your children and be open to them.
Yeah. Managing that whole family dynamic and, you just talk about dating your wife and maintaining these relationships with your kids. How do you process that whole family dynamic to make it work? Like if you integrate it all together, it's just a matter of being diligent and, with your time and making sure that when you have time, you're giving it to them wholly, or what do you think?
I think that's part of it. And I think the other thing is sitting down for a meal together.
Hmm.
eating together. One of the jobs I used to have was working at a local fire academy teaching, and that was nights. The classes started at 7:30 and went till 10:30. So I'd have to leave here about 6 o'clock at night. My wife put dinner on the table every night that I was going there at 5 o'clock. And we would sit down as a family and have a meal and talk during that meal. No cell phones allowed at the table, no phones. And we'd sit and talk. And I think that's important for parents to get involved in. And you have to make time for your family.
Mm-hmm. To get back to the fire service, eventually you got very heavily into teaching. Obviously you talk about you're teaching, even on 9/11 you were teaching. What kind of inspired you to get involved in that? And when did that start?
That started in the 90s. I wrote a letter for the FDNY. My captain asked me to, about rapid intervention after Hackensack Ford. Okay, and I think that was in 91 was Hackensack Ford, I'm pretty sure. But I wrote this whole thing about rapid intervention teams and what we should do in the FDNY. And because I was a mere fireman, it ended up filed in the circular filing cabinet. But my division commander at the time was Vinny Dunn.
Oh, wow.
And
okay.
Vinny Dunn said, "Hey, Mike, can you put this letter?" He said, "I think it's excellent." I said, "Chief, you can have it." He said, "No, could you put it in the form of an article?" I said, "Sure, I could write an article on it." And I wrote an article, and he took it and shopped it around to both places that he wrote for, Fire Engineering and Firehouse magazine. And Harvey Eisner at Firehouse picked it up. And they wrote about it. And then I wrote a couple of things. And then Harvey Eisner asked me to come on board with Firehouse and do truck company tips. And I wrote a column for them every other month for probably about 2 years on truck company tips. And then I just started it from there.
I was fortunate enough when I had Chief Esposito on a month or so ago, and he shared some stories about working with Andy Fredericks. Is there anyone that comes into mind in terms of like these fire service, like Mount Rushmore people, the Vinnie Dunns of the world and stuff like that, that pop into mind in terms of stories you have that maybe aren't as generally known? I think that like we see these people and we put them on this Mount Rushmore, and sometimes we see them only as this writer, this teacher, this instructor. I like this opportunity to talk to someone like you that has seen behind the curtain and seen the real person, I think is so fascinating in terms of some of these Mount Rushmore figures. Like,
the one that comes to mind was kind of a fun one. It wasn't fun for the people, but I was a lieutenant. I was in 42 truck, and we were, at the time, we were in 31 trucks quarters. And we had a fire, and the fire was, we were the fast truck, the rapid intervention team. And I pull up, and they got a good job going in a Queen Anne type structure. And John Salk was the battalion chief. Mike Ciampo was working it. Chris Delisio was working it. So we were all kind of there. And I'm the fast truck. And Chief Salka was in the 18th Battalion at the time and was coming from a division conference. And so he was over at the division. He was a ways away. And he's talking to the dispatcher, trying to figure out what's going on. And I get on the radio, and I'm like, 42 truck to the Bronx K. And he's like, "Yeah, go ahead, 42 truck. Recommend to Chief Salka. He transmit a second alarm. This is a Queen Anne, fully involved, and then we have fire entering the exposure. And we need companies in the exposure now." And I said, "That's what I recommend." And then I hear, "Battalion 1-8 to the Bronx K. Go ahead, Battalion 1-8. Transmit the second alarm. Mike, go into the exposure. Get me another fast truck, Bronx, and we're putting 42 truck to work right now." and get me a full second alarm assignment. So I got to go in there. And afterwards, didn't get much into the exposure, but it was taking the windows and the siding was going and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a great time. And John Salka, just being the boss he is, just cool, calm, and like, yeah, transmit the second alarm, put him into work, get me another guy. And those are the kind of things. I got to work with Tommy Richardson, who was the chief of department, Ed Kilduff, who was the chief of department, Sal Casano. I got to know all of these people who were iconic members of the FDNY. And the reason that this happens is because you are involved in the job. Mm-hmm. To the young men and women out there, get involved in your job. Be a part of your job. And it will pay immeasurable dividends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to that, like getting involved in the job, you eventually are asked to give the keynote at FDIC, which is kind of, in terms of fire instructors, this is the thing. Like for those of the people that have been fortunate enough to be asked to give the keynote at FDIC, it is really like the career, Everest.
Yep.
Talk to me about being asked, or however that process works, and then the preparation for that, because obviously that's got to be like the biggest moment or one of the biggest moments for you.
Yeah, it was 2011. Bobby Halton asked me. Bobby Halton was a dear friend of mine. He and Diane asked me. I went over to see them in New Jersey when fire engineering used to be in Fairlawn, and they asked me if I would be willing to do the keynote. I said, absolutely. And so I did it, and I wanted to wear my uniform. So I had to ask the FDNY for permission, and I had to send my speech through the chain of command to the chief of department, and he approved my speech. So I got to wear my uniform. Because very honestly, I don't know about other departments out there, but if you're wearing your uniform and you're still active and you're going to give a keynote or wear something and you're in your uniform and you're active, you have to understand that you are now a member of that department and doing this as a member of that department. Mm-hmm. So that's something that you have to do. Writing the keynote took a little bit, but I had the idea, and because they asked me early, so I had plenty of time to prepare. So I had a couple of months to sit down and write it and work on it. And you only have 20 minutes, and 20 minutes to talk by yourself is a long time to give a keynote. Mm-hmm. But 20 minutes to talk, if you look now, we've been at this for
hour and a half
already, Mm-hmm. And so it's just, what is the message? What do you want to know? And that was my message, was, why are you here? What are you doing for the fire service? And, I talked about that thing, and it's still in my workshop in the other part of my basement behind me, that says, and it's my favorite sign, my aunt gave it to me on my 16th birthday, and the sign says, what you are is God's gift to you. What you make of yourself is your gift to God. And my aunt was very Christian, and I changed that for the fire service. The fire service, your job is your gift to you. What you do is your gift back to the fire service. What you make of yourself. I mean, you can be a shining star or you can be an idiot. And, everybody's going to know from day one what you're going to be.
How much pressure did you feel to say what you wanted to say with the biggest platform in the fire service, right? Like, did you feel a lot of pressure to, like, get something off your chest, to make an impact, to it just, you're never going to have a bigger stage than the FDIC stage.
Right. And it's to make an impact and to motivate people. And I think that speech did it. I mean, I still have people call me and say that they show it to every one of their recruits at the beginning of recruit school. Mm-hmm. And I think that's amazing. That's awesome. That it will stay longer than I'm here. And I think that's amazing.
Mm-hmm. So what year did you eventually leave the FDNY?
February of 2012.
Okay.
I had to get my knee replaced.
What was that decision like to walk away?
It wasn't mine because I couldn't walk. My knee was so bad. I ended up having my knee replaced. I couldn't do the job. I couldn't climb the stairs with the gear on. So it was out of my hands.
Did that bother you, that the thing that you've done that long got taken away from you in some way, shape, or form?
Yeah, it did in some ways, but the other thing was I was still involved. I was teaching. I was working for a school in New York City, the New York Fire Safety Institute. So I was going into buildings. I was doing classes for residents. So I was still involved. So that helped a lot.
Mm-hmm. What do you miss about it now?
I miss the kitchen. My favorite memory is the rig after a job, where everybody's sitting on the rig. As I say, they are snotty and smiling. And you shouldn't be snotty anymore because you don't want to get cancer.
Yeah.
But you're smiling after a fire, and most people would think that was sick. But you did your job and you put the fire out. And what did you do? Where'd you go? How'd you get there? What'd you encounter? How hot was it? Where was it? The men and women are all working together, talking and comparing notes and trying to get better. And that was my favorite place in the fire service, was the rig after a job.
Mm-hmm. And then if we progress farther, 2020, you win the Tom Brennan Lifetime Achievement Award. What was that like to be notified of that?
Crazy. A dumb kid from New York. How the hell did I get this?
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea why. I still, I did what I loved. And that's the thing that I say to everybody. I had a job that I loved. I look at my father, my old man. My dad worked for the American Tobacco Company and hated to go to work. And how far things have changed. He had to smoke to have his job because he had to test out cigarettes.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So, and here I am doing something that I love. And it's just the greatest thing in the world. So I think as a member of the fire service, you've been rewarded. You are part of the greatest organization in the world. The fire service is the only job in the world where people want to do more. Even though we're getting beat up by EMS, by CO2, smoke detector calls, nuisance calls, stuck elevators, every brother or sister out there wants to go to another fire to try to make the world better, to try to realign the world where everyone is safe. And I think that is the greatest thing in the world.
Mm-hmm. What's going on now? How do you spend your days? I know you're still busy teaching and traveling and doing all the things. What does it look like to be you now? And what are you looking towards the future towards?
I do a lot of traveling. I have been to all 50 states. I am looking to do more traveling with my wife. And very honestly, I'm getting ready. I'm 70 now. I'm getting ready to shut down the teaching in the next 2 years or so and just enjoy the rest of my life with my wife. Mm-hmm. Go out, travel, see the world. We want to go on different trips. We have trips planned for our 40th anniversary. My brother-in-law, my sister, when we travel, we call and see if they want to come with us. We like to go to different things. We just booked our trip to the Philly Flower Show. My wife loves flowers, and I love the Philly Flower Show for the engineering of it. So it's all the different stuff. It's just enjoying life and enjoying each other's company.
Mm-hmm. And so and I'm going to let you go here, but I do want to, in retrospect, what makes you proud of your career? Obviously, you have an amazing career, something that warrants this Lifetime Achievement Award, which is unbelievable. What makes you personally proud when you look back?
The relationships I've formed, the friends I've made. I have a friend that I met through the fire service who lives in Australia. We talk every week to week and a half. And we have to figure it out because we're 14 hours different. Depends on the time frame. We have to figure out when we can catch up. I have friends all over the country, Sacramento, Seattle, Alaska. And they're all my friends because of the fire service. So that is what I'm the proudest of. And the one thing I will say that I want to make a point of is the one thing I wish I had done is started a journal when I started my career.
Mm.
And I didn't. To remember the fires I went to, with the brothers and sisters I went to, who they were and where they were. Okay? Just, I wish I had started a journal. And if any young firefighter asks me what's the one thing I regret, it's not starting a journal.
Huh. Well, with that, thank you so much for the time. Thank you for your career indebted to the fire service and loving the job as much as you did and inspiring the next generation to hopefully love it just as much. We'll tag links to your social media and we'll tag links to where they can see you speak and stuff like that in the notes. Captain Dugan, it's been an honor to talk to you. I could probably talk to you for another 20 hours, but I do know that I got to let you go at some point here. Thank you so much for the time, sir.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Jake. Thank you.
Absolutely.